For those of you who don't know me, my name's Aaron. I'm a grad student in the genetics department. I work in Doug Menke's lab. And what I want to talk about today is actually my experience doing looking through careers in science communication, as well as a science filmmaking internship that I did over the summer. And at the end of the talk, I'll also leave you with some resources if you're interested in investigating this field further. So the other day, I was chatting with a friend, a fellow grad student in the department, and we're both approaching the end of our program. And this question came up, of course, and it's, what do you want to do when you grow up, right? And he said, well, he wants to do a postdoc. And I said, I want to be a professional science communicator. And he actually gave me this weird look. He was like, is that a real job? Can you actually do that? And my answer is yes. Right now, science communication is a really young field, but we're at a time where we need more communicators and we need better communicators. So I wanted to just kind of review different types of subfields within this field, because when I joined the program, I didn't know any of this existed. Sometimes when you hear the term SciComm, you think it refers to only communicating with the public, but that's not necessarily the case. There are a lot of technical forms of SciComm. So if you think about science writing, for example, and medical writing specifically, these writers actually work with doctors and health professionals on clinical trials, trying to summarize the results and write those into manuscripts, right? And then we're all pretty familiar with grant writing, right? But now there are companies such as Grant Engine that I'm showing here that actually work with biotech and pharmaceutical companies to help them secure their funding. There's another big field called science policy. And when I first heard about this, I thought it refers to something political, like you have to talk with politicians. But that's not necessarily the case, because there are policies at the local and at the state level as well. So if you think about educational policy, what do we teach in our classrooms? That's one type of subfield. And there are also policies related to wildlife conservation or environmental protection. So if you think about the Georgia Department of Natural Resources or the Wildlife Resources Division specifically, this is a way that you can make a difference at the local level. Next up, I'd like to talk about education. So we're all very familiar with teaching, but now there are actually companies like Galactic Polymath that specifically focus on lesson development. So they work directly with scientists, researchers, take things that are published in the primary literature and convert that into lessons that can be used in the classroom. And this can be at the K through 12 level, or it can be even in an undergrad classroom as well. And now, if there are any artists that are in the audience, I would encourage you to look into becoming a scientific illustrator and animator, right? So if you've seen these really fancy looking journal covers, somebody actually has to draw those, right? And as an illustrator, you can also work on, like, if you look in kind of like a science journal or Nature, you see these really professional looking illustrations or animations. Somebody has to draw that as well. So that's a potential career path. And then lastly, I'll talk about outreach. I'll be talking about filmmaking later on, but I did want to mention, I just heard about this. You can actually work as a museum educator as well. So you work in a lab, you do experiments for the museum, but a big part of your job duties are also dedicated to outreach as well. And then lastly, I'll talk about a lot of universities or research institutes have a research communications department. And so their job is to kind of work with researchers at the institute and help them disseminate what they find to the general public. Okay, so even if you don't want to be a science communicator as a professional, I do want to emphasize that communicators are here to directly support scientific research, and they can help you produce content that's, supporting you. So I talked about grant writing, course development, illustrations in the previous slides, but I did want to mention I know science communicators that actually specifically focus on things like designing a website for your lab or designing a logo, because nowadays having an online presence is really important. And then, as I said later today, I'll talk about making videos. And this can refer to very technical types of videos. So if you've ever heard of Jove or the Journal of Visualized Experiments, they're publishing research done by scientists, specifically documenting protocols, right? So they can disseminate that to other researchers in their field. And then later I'll focus on videos for educational and outreach purposes. And I just want to remind all the researchers here, whether you're a PI working on a big grant or a grad student working on something like the GRFP from the NSF, there's going to be a section called the broader impact section, right? And the whole goal is to try to answer this question: how are we actually benefiting society? So I just want to remind everyone that you can work directly with a science communicator, write them into your grants, and they can help you produce any of the content that I've listed here, right? And if you're like, well, I don't know a science communicator, well, that's fine because now you know me. And like I said, I'm heading towards graduation, trying to look for a job. So if you want to work on any projects together, you can let me know. So now I'll talk a bit about my journey in SciComm and why would you want to hire me, right? I've been really fortunate to come to UJ and join Doug's lab because we do amazing research. We study Evo Devo. We're interested in gene regulation. Many of you already know we study lizards. Here's a glowing lizard embryo. But we also study other species like mice. You can see these alligator embryos shown here. And it's just been a really amazing experience working in the lab over the past few years. But what I had learned from doing all this and working with everybody in the lab was that the media, the videos, the pictures that we were producing, these glowing embryos, they actually acted as amazing tools to engage an audience. So, some of the stuff we do is really technical, genomics, bioinformatics, and to the general public, it's kind of hard to understand. But if you have a strong visual aid, it can really engage your audience. And so I decided a few years ago in grad school just to start photography, just kind of like a hobby for fun. I didn't really think it would relate at all to my research, right? And I would go to the UJ gardens, take pictures of photogenic animals such as this green anole shown here. I then transitioned to doing photos of just friends and family, these portrait shots, and taking pictures of my pets. And of course, one of the best models that I know. This is my wife, Adani, here, and we kind of do photography together now. And I've also been able to work with grad students in my department and do their professional headshots. So if you ever see them on LinkedIn, you're probably likely to hire them, right? I will stop to put in a plug here. We're trying to do this as a mini photography business. So if you need any portraits done, you need to update your LinkedIn photo or take a picture of your cats or something, you can let me know after the talk. So back to the topic. Well, what does photography have to do with science communication? Well, as I said, our lab works on lizards. We've been trying to establish it as a model organism, and we're really interested in gene function. So for many years, we were trying to develop CRISPR gene editing in the species of reptile, right? And after a lot of hard work, we were actually able to get CRISPR working, right? And this was a very novel technique. And we wanted to publish it, right? So that other labs could learn how to do it. And so that's where I stepped in with just my basic photography skills and taking pictures of, just all the lizards that we were producing from our studies, right? And another thing that was really important for this publication was creating a video, right? And we wanted to document the procedure to do this because gene editing had never been done in any reptile, and they have a unique reproductive biology. So I helped co-produce this video that was then used in the publication. And then lastly, I did submit a photo of this albino lizard to the journal Cell Reports, and it was chosen as the cover. So that's one of my proudest achievements. But what I had learned from this entire experience was that making these really strong visual aids directly impacted our research because we were not only getting notice from researchers in our field, but it was reaching the general public as well. From around the world, different news outlets were picking it up. So CNN actually came to our lab to interview the scientists that worked on this project. So I was seeing that, like I said, these strong visuals were impacting our research. So through the years, I've been trying to get more experience in science communication, and one way was by attending this conference called ComSciCon, and this is the Atlanta division, right? So fun fact, this was on March 13th, 2020, which is the last day before the great shutdown due to COVID. And here's our socially distanced photo. You can see me here taking what would be the future pandemic seriously. But Going to ComSciCon was pretty amazing. It was like a 2-day event, and you got to hear from all types of experts in many different fields, got to network a lot. And one person that I met is Rob Nelson, and he's a professional science filmmaker. He runs his own educational media company called Untamed Science. And he's also worked on a lot of different TV shows for these kind of well known networks, such as National Geographic, Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, so on and so forth. And at this conference, he actually hosted a mini workshop where he taught us science filmmaking techniques, scientific storytelling, how to edit, and stuff like that. And I just was blown away. I thought it was amazing, really fun, and a great way to kind of talk about your science, right? And so after the conference was done, I just, walked up to him and I was like, this is amazing. I don't know anything about it. I want to learn more. And he was like, yeah, we should work together because he said, well, I'm located in Charlotte and that's only a few hours away. We can meet up and work on a project together. I said, wow, this is amazing. But then, of course, this is when the pandemic began, and this affected us in many different ways, right? But we're always trying to look for the silver lining. And for me, it meant that because I couldn't go into the lab, I couldn't really do any experiments, I was stuck at home. I decided that I should do more outreach and do more science communication, right? And it just started via social media, just sharing like cool pictures on these platforms. But then I heard about this video competition, right? And this is from the Society for Developmental Biology, right? We all know it's the biggest society in our field. And the challenge for this competition was pretty simple, actually. It's listed down here. And all I had to do was make a video, 5 minutes or less, that was kind of summarizing what we do in the lab and gear it towards a lay audience, right? And so, like I said, I was stuck at home in quarantine, and for 3 weeks, I was just taking all the media that we had produced in the lab, putting it all together in a story. And I decided to make a video, of course, on my favorite model organism, the brown anole, and describe how it's a great model for studying development, evolution, and genetics, right? And so with no experience at all, I put this video together, submitted it, and I'm proud to say that I did win the competition. But this was an amazing experience, again, because, they played the video during the national conference, which was virtual, live audience of 200 people, and I just got a hugely positive response. People were directly messaging me saying, I'm going to use this in my classroom now, or, I'm going to show my friends this video, or I'm going to show my parents. And I was like, wow, like I'm actually reaching very far with this 5-minute video, right? And so seeing that impact really inspired me to explore filmmaking some more. And so I reached back out to Rob Nelson earlier this year, and I was like, we're all vaccinated. This is before the Delta variant, and why don't we meet up and I can work on a project with you and just shadow you in your day-to-day life. And he said, yeah, he was really excited because, of course, the pandemic affected him as well, because for his job, he travels a lot to film. So he couldn't do any of that for, a whole year, basically. So let's talk about the filmmaking experience now. And I'll actually let Rob tell you what we did.
Hey everyone, this is just a quick Patreon exclusive update. I wanted to fill you in on what I'm doing. One of those is, this is Aaron right back here. He's filming the process of how I make videos. This is the very first mini Untamed Science internship. So for 3 days, I've been flying the drone and we've been doing 360 videos. We've been just looking at a lot of different aspects of filmmaking. He's been looking over my shoulder. In addition to Adani, who both of them are science communicators. They're finishing up in Georgia. They're early career scientists. And so I think it's kind of cool to be able to just show people what I do, because it is an interesting career that not a lot of people know about. But yeah, we have a couple videos also that we've been working with that you will see coming out soon. So I have a video on invasive plants. It's actually on privet in particular, which I'm going to leave a link to down below. And then what we're going to do is create 3 more of those. Those will be coming out soon. I've also been busy with this ketamine video, which I gave an update on last week. Now the ketamine video is kind of cool because it's made me feel really good, a little bit quicker, and it's done a lot of neat things, but I'm going to need a review of that rough cut. So if you want to look at it and tell me what you think, it's a very raw view of mental health in some ways, so I think that would be helpful. I'm gonna probably make a whole new post about it, but I'll leave a little link down below as well. And then I've also been making postcards, a lot of postcards.
Okay, we can move on.
I have 48 postcards.
Okay, so before we talk about the internship some more, I did want to introduce you to the team that I work with. So you already heard from Rob Nelson. And I wanted to just talk about his background a little bit. So his background is in marine biology. He has a master's degree in behavioral and population ecology of fishes specifically. And he also has a master's degree in science filmmaking. But what Rob had told me was that doing the master's in filmmaking is not super necessary nowadays because, you know, if you want to learn how to use a camera, if you want to learn how to edit, how to use different programs, all of that's freely available on YouTube, right? Like you can find it online now. So the master's wasn't really useful for the technical aspects of filmmaking. But what Rob also told me was that doing these master's degrees was really helpful for building the network, right? So what happened during the time, during grad school, is Rob and a small group of friends actually got together and decided to just make a bunch of science videos about the research that grad students were doing in their department, right? So it just started out as a small thing. This is, you know, before YouTube was really popular, no one was really making short form educational science videos at the time. But this was really important because it actually got them noticed by Pearson Education, and they were actually offered a deal to make science videos for all the different textbooks that this company produces, right? So Pearson Education actually was like, here's $1 million. You guys can travel around the world and make all kinds of cool educational videos. So Rob and his team, they thought that they'd be doing this the rest of their lives, working for Pearson. But of course, things changed when YouTube picked up and educational content became freely available now instead of in textbooks. So they've had to make adjustments because of that. I'd like to also introduce you to Haley, who is another really great educator. Her background's in biology, but interestingly enough, she has a fine arts minor with an emphasis on acting. So that's kind of helped her kind of land jobs, hosting different science shows, producing different shows as well. And she has an educational background as a teacher and science coordinator as well. And lastly, I'll introduce you to August and Leo, who are probably two of the most kick-ass science communicators I've ever met. They have this kind of infectious curiosity for the world, and they're really natural in front of the camera. They're just really good with technology, of course. And yeah, I have nothing bad to say about these kids. Oh, I don't know how that got in there. All right, so this is part of the team who works on Untamed Science, this educational media company that I mentioned. And, you know, like I said, they've worked with TV networks before, but they're trying to actually become more independent now, producing educational content and posting it mostly to these different YouTube channels that I have, which are broadly related to biology content, right? So I wanted to just show you what those YouTube channels look like. All right, so we're looking here at the Stone Age Man YouTube channel. This is one of their bigger channels. They have 170,000 subscribers, and I've sorted it by their most viral videos, basically. So you can see a lot of them have millions of views, which is pretty insane. But their expertise would actually be mainly in wildlife biology and kind of like survival skills and stuff like that. So they've produced videos, you know, on different flowers, plants, symbiosis, as you can see. Any of you studying albino lizards, you might be interested in watching this white squirrel video. This mosquito video is really interesting because they actually go into a lab, talk to a researcher, and then, you know, show themselves getting fed on by thousands of mosquitoes. So it's kind of gross, but really interesting. Their most popular video is literally they find a dead deer on the side of the road and they decide to do a time lapse of it decomposing. And if you watch that video, you'll see the kids being involved and, like I said, being amazing science communicators. And then the second channel, or the second biggest channel, is the one that's based on filmmaking. And this is geared towards scientists and educators who are interested in STEM in general. And it's just all kinds of different tips. So how to use a camera if you've never used a camera before, how to film a certain type of shot like a hyperlapse, how to do various types of editing. I know many of you are molecular biologists, so you might want to watch some of the animation videos or stop motion. That could be really useful for that type of work. Okay. And then what I want to do now is play some clips from the videos that we worked on while I was at the internship. I'm not going to play the whole videos, but what I want you all to keep in mind as we watch these videos is how cool would it be if someone were to produce videos like this about your research, right? Like how impactful it would be. And maybe that person can be you if you're interested in filmmaking. So let's play these videos. And I will say that they were probably 80 to 90% done when I got there. So I was involved in filming a little bit of it, but mostly I was getting to see the behind the scenes and the editing for these videos. So here we go.
Everybody, this plant smells super good and it has these beautiful white flowers, but it is one of the worst weeds in the world. In fact, if you live in the Southeast, you probably have it in your yard. Big thing is, you gotta do something about it. I'm talking about privet.
It's science. Birds eating privet seeds is like eating McDonald's. They love to eat it, they'll eat a lot, and it runs right through them.
Now to help me figure this out, I went to go see the expert, Dr. David Coyle.
This is all privet here, hold on. Almost all privet, here's a big one. All of this is privet. This is privet, this is privet, this is privet, this is privet, this is privet. It takes over these bottomland areas, completely crowds out native vegetation. Lots of research shows us that where there is privet, there is a lot less bees and butterflies and other really important pollinators. And that is one of the main reasons we're going to talk about how to get rid of this privet. My name is Dave Coyle, and I've been working in forest health and invasive species for over 20 years now, the last decade or so down here in the Southeast. My job is to help landowners and land managers deal with invasive species, manage their land. Most of the time, that means helping people get rid of invasive things. Privet's not good because it's just so tough. Like, it can grow anywhere in the sun, in the shade, bottomlands, uplands. I mean, you see the thing everywhere. You know, it used to be really promoted as a landscape plant, and people used to go around selling the stuff all over, like, hey, have a privet hedge, have a privet hedge. And that's all fine and dandy if you're going to keep it trimmed up twice a year so it doesn't go to flower and set seeds. But too often these things go feral, I call them. When people leave, the bushes just get big, the birds eat the berries, they fly around, they poop them out, and then we have privet everywhere at this point. So that's why, you know, every roadside, bottomland, it's just full of this stuff. And it is fairly tough to get rid of. It can be done, but it takes a sustained effort. Privet can be...
All right, I'm going to stop it right here. Some of you may know Dave Coyle. He actually did his postdoc here at UJ, and he's now at Clemson as an assistant professor, but he still works a lot with the forestry department here in Athens. Yeah. And then I'll play now kind of a longer segment of the second video. It's about ketamine. It's a very different topic, and I think it really has a strong emotional pull. It's about, you know, mental health and depression, and I think it's just really interesting. So let's go ahead and watch this video now.
This is the place where I had a transformation that changed my life.
We really want to fix things for people. We really are not interested in just Band-Aids.
Day one. Today we're looking into the science of ketamine and NAD. Now if you've never heard of ketamine or NAD, then you're like most people. Like, that's partly why I'm doing this video, but also because I've seen firsthand how it's affected people with depression, anxiety, and addiction. One of them, oddly enough, being my wife Haley. So because Haley is such a huge advocate of all of this, I figured the best way to look into the science of it was to do it myself. So we actually have a week-long treatment planned for the both of us with the expert himself, Dr. Conover. Dr. Conover has pioneered this treatment and is one of the world's experts. So as a biologist, naturally I had a lot of questions, in part because I had never heard about this before until Haley went herself.
And in fact, most people I talk to have never heard of it or the benefits, so that seemed like a natural first place to start.
I think NAD is the source of energy. It's the source of energy in the cell. Probably turns off cravings better than any agent or substance that we know about.
A quick refresher for all of you who've taken an introductory biology class: if you open the book up to cellular respiration, that's how we get our energy, the cycles all include NAD. And as you get older, you produce less and less NAD, so it's a little bit of a reset.
Ketamine is the pattern disruptor. And so ketamine allows us to slow down our thinking, shift our perspective, and is becoming more well known for refractory depression, anxiety, PTSD, chronic pain. It's a pattern disruptor.
And the idea of disrupting a pattern is what I wanted to understand more fully, because this is exactly what I saw with Haley.
This was the reset that gave me the opportunity to move forward. And the overall sense of well-being is something that I can't describe because, well, I never thought that I wouldn't be in that pain and be in that sort of daily slog, much less actually feel good.
And for those of you who don't really know Haley, you'd recognize her as the most fun, outgoing person ever, which she is.
And it may be naive to think that we can help change the world for the better, but that's what I want.
But like many of us, she had also been living with a loop of depression that she couldn't logically control.
I was at a point where I would lay down at night and the feeling of dread was, oh no, I'm gonna wake up tomorrow morning and I'll have to do all this again. Because the daily trudge of getting through my own life, which is a wonderful life, but because whatever I had built up in my head over time had changed how I viewed myself. And I was doing so much to combat that. It was, I needed something else.
And Haley was doing all the things.
The adventure continues.
She had a good supportive community. She had a therapist. She was working out, eating well.
Is that a little valley girl?
And finally, through the doctors over the last 7 years, she had multiple SSRIs, but they didn't seem to work.
Ketamine versus an SSRI, which is something like Prozac. Those medicines, once prescribed, take a good 3 to 4 weeks to kick in, whereas ketamine is instantaneous. That's really amazing that you can kind of change someone's landscape or perception of their world almost immediately.
Now here are some interesting facts for you. Somewhere around 10% of people suffer from depression. And of the people that try to get treated for depression, about a third don't respond. It's known as treatment-resistant depression, which is what Haley had.
Well, maybe it's the field I'm in, doing media stuff, and it's kind of like ups and downs with jobs. But a lot of people are taking antidepressants. And this was so interesting to me because with Haley, it felt like it worked almost over. It was a week. She came back. The self that she had before was back.
Haley's first treatment session was 6 months ago, and she hasn't had any relapses since.
This works really quickly, and it's very...
All right, I'll pause it right here. We can move on. And if you want to watch these videos more, then you can just check out their channels. Okay. But like I said, if somebody were to come into your lab and make videos like this, just think about the impact it would make, right? Okay, so I want to talk about more of what I did while I was in Charlotte. And we actually spent a whole day actually doing location scouting. So Rob and Haley have had this idea to make a new TV show focused on farm animals, basically. So we literally went in the middle of nowhere to this farm, this huge piece of land. And the goal was to actually get some photos and get some footage that would be used for future videos, but that would also be used for what's called a pitch meeting. So that later in the day, they actually met with a creative director to kind of pitch this idea and show some pictures, just to be like, here's our idea for a show. Will you pick us up on your network? And I actually got to sit in that pitch meeting. It was really interesting and just a unique experience. So this is the farm. Here's some video of goats running in a train, lots of different animals on the property. We got peacocks, chickens, Boots the cat. There are lots of different types of fruits and kind of flowering plants on the property, and it took us pretty much the whole day to hike around it. Was able to get a picture of this photogenic lizard, of course, this chunky little guy. And what I want to show you now is some footage from a GoPro Max. This is going to be of the farmhouse that we visited. And I'm going to talk a little bit about gear in the next coming slides, but I just thought this was interesting because I didn't know anything about it. It's a camera that it has a lens on both sides, and it's filming literally 360 degrees in front of you, behind you, above, and below. So it's filming everything. And the kind of raw footage looks something like this. It's not super meaningful, like if you were to watch in a video form. But what you can do is go into the GoPro software and edit it in a way that looks more realistic, right? So like I said, this is the farmhouse that we visited. And this is the 360 footage, but Rob has edited it so it's pointing in a specific direction. And you can see he's holding it right now on a stick. And funny enough, the software automatically removes that stick, so it looks like it's just floating. But it's a really cool piece of gear. It's a GoPro, so it's really rugged. It's waterproof. It has this built-in stabilization. And it's actually a pretty versatile tool because the thing about interviewing people that are not used to being in front of a camera is that they can get really intimidated with a big camera. So like a GoPro is really small and you can just put it down, have it recording, and people just feel more natural when they're doing interviews. And then with the GoPro 360, the one that we're using here, you can like put it in the middle of a room and like interview multiple people. And then you can edit it so it's like pointing at one person at a time, whoever's talking, to make it look like a normal video rather than like an ultra wide angle, right? And then another type of gear I got to learn how to use is actually a drone. This is another type of camera that I just didn't know anything about before the internship, but it's a really, really amazing piece of technology. So I'll show you a demo video now. So this was shot at a friend's house of Rob. And this is with one of the higher end drones, so it has a lot of cool features. This whole video is automatically recorded. The path is set beforehand, and it's focusing on the subjects automatically. The drone's pretty amazing because it has all these sensors on it to prevent it from crashing. It can detect obstacles and stuff like that. The drones are also pretty smart. Like if you fly several miles away, it can detect its own battery and it'll fly back to home if it's running low. So that just, doesn't crash in the middle of nowhere in a lake or something. It's also has a sport mode where it can track very fast moving objects. Like it can follow a boat either from the side view or from behind it or in front of it, or it can follow like a person running. And of course you can produce really cool videos like this one. So like the way this works is that the drone will record a video and then ascend to a certain height. It'll stop and then it'll take a bunch of pictures, wide angle pictures, and then stitch them together into this kind of tiny planet or tiny Earth looking image. And this is done fully automatically as well. And now I know many of you probably work in a lab and you're like, why the heck would I need a drone? I'm not going to fly it indoors, right? But it's actually another versatile tool because the camera is held on this physical stabilizer, right? A gimbal. And so right now, this footage I'm showing, I'm doing this handheld, and you can see that it's stabilized. I'm following these ducks, and it doesn't look really jerky, right? So I've had ideas where I bring in the drone to the lab, I can film people working at the bench or doing an experiment, and just have this really professional stabilized video as well. And now I can say that I'm technically an FAA certified pilot. I'm now certified. So that's one of those weird things that I can put on my CV now. All right, so now we're towards the end of the talk, and I wanted to talk about how science filmmakers actually make their revenue. And it can vary depending on who the professional is, but this is how Rob is able to make revenue. So of course, like I said, they're trying to work more independently from TV networks and switch full-time to YouTube. And if you're familiar with YouTube, then and you don't have an ad blocker, you've probably seen all these ads, and that's one way to get paid, right? But there are also different types of ads, the sponsored ones, which are actually integrated into the video. So whoever the creator is of the video, they typically will say, oh, well, this product is amazing, you should go use it, right? And that's, like I said, integrated into it. And so these tend to pay a little bit more than like the normal types of ads on YouTube. And there are other creative way that people can make money using these platforms, such as soft marketing techniques. So I can show you what I mean by this. Like if you go to Rob's YouTube channel and you watch some of these videos, such as the one with talking about gear, like different ropes or like a knife or anything like that, just kind of showing it in the video without actually talking about the product specifically, that can be a form of soft marketing. So like another example is like if you're watching a TV show and like they have like a Coke in the background, they're not actually saying it's an amazing product, but that's a form of soft marketing that companies will actually pay you for. And then product reviews are another way that creators can make money. So if you go to the filmmaking tips channel here, and you can see he goes over different types of drones or like GoPros, companies will actually send him that gear to review, and they'll pay you for that as well. And if it's a good company, it'll actually be an unbiased review. So you can say if it's a terrible product or not and still get paid for it, right? And you typically also get to keep the gear after the review is done as well. Okay, and then another platform I didn't really know much about is called Patreon, and it's a way for fans and supporters to kind of interact with content creators. It's not just for filmmakers. So if you're someone who's interested in like running your own podcast or making music or creating art, any type of creator can actually use this to interact with your supporters. I'll show you what Patreon looks like. All right. So this is Rob's Patreon. So you can see that you can donate different amounts of money per month to support these creators. And there are different tiers. So the more you donate, you can get like a signed copy of a book, for example, or be listed as an executive producer on videos. And for Rob, it's actually a really useful tool, not only as a small form of income, but on his page, he actually posts updates, but he's also posting kind of rough cuts of videos. So like this ketamine video that we just watched, he posted it before it went public to get feedback from his supporters. And so the fans can actually feel like they're becoming involved when they give all this feedback of like how to improve the video, right? Okay, since I talked about drones, I also want to talk about how it can be a potential income source. Drones nowadays, they're actually becoming cheaper and more affordable to get. But Rob has talked about doing kind of videos and photography for like aquariums, local museums, but you can also do this type of work for like real estate companies nowadays. And, just a 1 or 2 hour video session and pay like $200 or so, depending on, who the company is. So one way to supplement your income. And then I just wanted to put a plug in for this book that Rob and Haley have wrote recently. If any of you know or have written a book, you know that you don't really make that much money off books. But I did want to put a plug in because it is an interesting book for someone like me who, I work indoors, I work in the lab all the time, so I'm not like super familiar with nature and animals and stuff like that. So it's a really good read, easy to read. It's good for kids as well. So I encourage you to check out this book. So that's pretty much a summary of what I did during the internship. Trying to play these videos. Really fun experience. I learned so much. There was so much I couldn't cover in this 1 hour talk today. But yeah, it was so much fun. So I do have some key takeaways from this whole experience. One of which I'll say is that we as scientists, we all have a story worth telling. So like when I work in the lab and I'm doing all these experiments and when stuff doesn't work out, sometimes I'm wondering like, does anybody actually care about what I'm doing? Like I care about what I'm doing, my PI cares, and perhaps the department cares, but how about like the general public? And as I talked to Rob and Haley, they were like, yeah, you're doing amazing research. Nobody knows about this, but everybody should know about this, right? Like we need to share what we're doing in our labs. We need to do this outreach. And nowadays, I'll share this proverb that a lot of photographers say. It's that the best camera you have is the one you have with you. So if you have a phone, you have a camera, and gear doesn't really matter. If you want to make a video, you want to take pictures, anyone can do that nowadays, and you can share your science. The second takeaway for me is that it was really important to get out of the lab, especially after the pandemic and after the shutdown. Just exposing yourself to a new environment. And I recommend this to anyone. It doesn't have to be necessarily for SciComm purposes. Like you can just go visit another lab just to learn a technique, right? It was just really refreshing. And what I noticed from visiting Rob was that, you know, running a lab, being a PI is very, very similar to like running your own business and being a professional science communicator. So there are a lot of parallels. And that kind of revealed to me that I had skills that could apply to jobs outside of academia, right? Like I'm not just a professional pipetter, I can do other things. So that was a big takeaway for me. And then another big takeaway that you'll hear at any kind of career talk, which is networking. I describe my experience, and I feel like I've only been able to be exposed to all these opportunities because of the network and just talking to people. And for some people, like when you hear networking, you're like, oh, it's obvious, go talk to somebody. And for other people, it's like, what does networking even mean? So it's only in the recent years I got to learn how to do this better. And if you need to build your network, well, now I'm in your network. And if you want to talk about my research or about SciComm projects, then I'm happy to discuss that further. Okay, lastly, we're at the end of the talk, and I just wanted to leave you all with some resources. For the grad students, I really recommend taking this course, GRSC 8200. It's from the grad school. It's only 1 credit. I think it's taught in the spring. Pretty easy course, but also very rewarding. You get to kind of learn from experts in all types of different fields. You get to do a few different activities related to SciComm. And it's really interesting because it's co-taught by someone in the theater department. So you actually get to participate in these improv activities, which actually take you out of your comfort zone and kind of apply improv to science communication. So it's not a class you're going to fall asleep in because you're going to be active and walking around and doing these fun little games basically related to SciComm. And then I talked earlier about ComSciCon, this conference. There's one that's the Atlanta division, which is kind of related to the Southeast, but there are other divisions as well, and a national one. This is open to grad students as well as recent grads. And like I said, it was an amazing experience just to network and to learn about different careers. And then lastly, if you're interested in filmmaking yourself, then I would check out Rob's channel, which is focused on science filmmaking tips. Okay, lastly, I wanted to mention that Alex Danis is actually coming to our department at UGA to give a seminar on November 17th. So that's our normal weekly Wednesday genetics seminar. So Alex Danis, she actually has her PhD from Stanford. She got her degree in genetics, but she's transitioned now to a professional filmmaker, and she runs her own media company called Helicase Media. And Alex has gotten actually more popular over the pandemic through social media, specifically on TikTok. She makes these really short form videos, a lot of which are focused on COVID, vaccines, and just different aspects of genetics and other biology as well. So really interesting stuff. She's done a video for Red Bull, actually, like comparing skydivers to hummingbirds. Really interesting. And I also wanted to mention that I'm going to be co-hosting a SciComm workshop with her on that following day, November 18th. And this will probably be like a hybrid in-person and virtual event. But if you're a grad student and you're interested, then please contact me and I can give you more details. So these are all the resources I just talked about. And then if you want to reach out and connect with me, I do a little bit of my outreach on social media, but I also have my portfolio on my website down here. That's that's all I have for you today. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Aaron. That was an interesting departure from what we normally do. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, it was really, really fun to hear about your internship and your experiences. And I can only say personally that, all of the videos and images that you've produced related to, especially the lizard research, there've been millions of eyes literally on some of those, especially photographs you've generated, and it's had a big impact on the lab. And so I had previously appreciated the need to have graphics and videos and so forth to communicate science, but much more so based on the material you've produced for the lab. It's been fantastic. So
yeah,
that was great.
It's just been a lot of fun. Like I said, I didn't know about any of this and like how impactful it could be, but after entering the video competition and hearing from all these researchers, then that's how I learned.
And congratulations to you for going after this and pursuing this. I've heard other SciComm talks, and I have to say you just did one of the best jobs I've heard in several years. So very well done.
Really appreciate that, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I also enjoyed this talk very much. I really wish that we have some nice figure from my lab.
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to learn how to just do basic drawings, but it's hard because I have no training at all.
And I'd have to say, in the lab, we've also been really fortunate because in addition to Aaron, we have two incredibly talented artists, right? So Ashley Ressis and now Anna Yushmanov, just really talented at generating really beautiful illustrations that help communicate our science. So
yeah, it's really great because I know some labs pay like hundreds or like thousands of dollars for these types of things. So it's nice to have someone on hand.
Yeah, for your information, for my postdoc, we pay $3,000 for cover image.
For the cover image.
The journal didn't take it.
Oh, they didn't like it. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so
that's crazy.
Anybody else have comments or thoughts? Well, thanks, Aaron. I super enjoyed that. That was just really fun, really interesting. And I certainly took away kind of some lessons, and I hope other people did as well.
Yeah, thank you all.